Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on this video. What I want to do is go through and annotate a short story with you. I picked a relatively short one. It's Ernest Hemingway's story, Hills Like White Elephants. Um, you know, in an online class, there is often a bit of a gap or a missing piece when it comes to faculty helping demonstrate for students how to do certain things. And I think, in a literature class, it's pretty tempting to think, well, you you wouldn't be able to get into a 200 level literature class if you couldn't read. You likely have read, literature as part of your educational journey to get to this point. So the idea that you completely understand what you're doing when you set out to annotate a text is sort of a foregone conclusion, or the idea is that you should already know how to do this, and I'm just asking you to demonstrate that you know how. That's, a problematic and troublesome way of thinking about it because not all of us come into a class like this knowing, having the same background information. Some of us read a lot for pleasure and fun, some not so much. Some have done annotation before, others have not. And there's always this key question, which is, it's important to demonstrate how you want people to do things. There's also a strange thing that happens in education where sometimes a professor feels like, well, if I show you how to do it, then you're not really doing it for yourself, which is, incredibly bizarre. It would be like showing, just giving you a math problem and saying, go do the math problem without actually walking through how to do the steps, or saying, write a research paper without showing you where to go to find research. That is sort of a critical error in instruction. And so what I want to do today is pull up a short story. It's in the public domain, so there are no copyright issues on this. And we're going to take a look at it. I'm going to go through and I'm going to annotate it in real time. Um, I've not annotated Hills Like White Elephants in an incredibly long time. I've actually not read the text of Hills Like White Elephants in a long time, although I have read it before. So I've got that, bit of an edge on it. If you would like to read the story without having anything spoiled, or have a more organic reading experience before you watch me annotate, I would recommend hitting pause on this video, go read the story. In the literary anthology, The Norton Introduction to Literature, the story is about 3 pages long. It's really not that long. And you can read it, pretty quickly, and then return to this video wherever you left off, or hit pause and then watch me go through and annotate it in real time. I'm not just going to sit silently. I'm going to talk all of my thoughts out loud as I go through. This is not how I read normally, right? I would prefer to read in a physical book, or I would prefer to have a physical copy in front of me, but this being an online course, and many of you, doing your reading on a tablet or on a laptop or some sort of other digital device, it's important for me to go through. When I read silently as well. I'm not going to read out loud as I'm doing here, but literally going to go through. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I want to go through and show you how I would annotate the text if I were going to submit the text to the class, and also just go through and give an experience of how to read critically, how I notice what I'm noticing, what I think about when I'm noticing certain things. I'll do my best to kind of play it out in real time. I can't escape the fact that I've read the story before, so that, certainly puts a bit of um, a slight twist on it. If you've never read the story before, our reading experiences are going to be just slightly different. But I hope this video is helpful, and you get something out of it. So let's go now to the screen share. Here we are in the course assignment. The goal here is to, I've selected the reading engagement for Hemingway. This is the sample reading engagement. I'm going to scroll down. This is the annotation button here. So I'm going to, read this. I started doing annotations in the previous video where I walked through and showed you how to approach annotations. So you can see that it did save my annotations, which is terrific. Um, but now we need to switch into um, a full screen mode, and hopefully that will make things a little easier to follow along with. Um, okay. All right. So the readings for this course, your textbook, comes with this prefatory section where you learn a little bit about the author, who the author is. There's a picture of the author, there's a title of the author. I recommend that you always start with reading this. You're not going to get anything spoiled if you do. These little author overviews aren't going to spoil anything, but they will tell you more about the author. And that can help actually when you get into the reading of the text because you can keep some information in mind, background information about the author. Sometimes students will say to me, well, you're an English professor. You read so much, deeper and better, and you pay more attention to details than I do. And if that's true, I think that's debatable, by the way. But if that is true, the only reason that it would be such is that I read slowly, I read carefully, I often read the texts for the course multiple times, right? It's often not the case that I am reading a text for the very first time in the class, although there is one story in our course that we're going to read in week 2 by Haruki Murakami called Barn Burning. And I've never read that story before. I usually try to assign at least one text in a course that I've never read before so I can have a more authentic reading experience with the students. So I'll, mention that again in week 2. And then when we discuss those texts during week 3, you'll be able to um, keep that in mind as we go forward. Okay. Ernest Hemingway, Hills Like White Elephants. So Hemingway lived 1899 to 1961. Among the most distinctive American of writers, even if he rarely wrote about America, Ernest Hemingway grew up in an upscale Chicago suburb, but spent his summers on Lake Walloon in northern Michigan. Here, his physician father nurtured his love of hunting and fishing. Hemingway graduated from high school. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit here. Um, Hemingway graduated from high school. Okay, that's great. Hemingway graduated from high school just 2 months after the United States entered World War I. Forbidden to enlist by his parents and uninterested in college, he worked as a reporter for the Kansas City Star before volunteering as a Red Cross ambulance driver. Badly wounded on the Italian front, he returned to the States and to journalism. Then in 1921, he moved to Paris, France, entering the famed expatriate circle that included Ezra Pound, Gertrude Stein, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Two volumes of stories in our time and Men Without Women, and two major novels, The Sun Also Rises and A Farewell to Arms, established Hemingway's international reputation as both a masterful literary craftsman and a chief spokesman for the lost generation. While later, less critically acclaimed books on topics such as bullfighting, Death in the Afternoon, and big game hunting, Green Hills of Africa, helped confirm his status as an almost mythic figure. Patron saint of what the New York Times called a cult of daring and danger. Hemingway supported the Loyalists in the Spanish Civil War, the subject of his novel For Whom the Bell Tolls, served as a war correspondent during World War II, survived two plane crashes and four marriages. That's funny. The way to survived four marriages. Severely depressed and suffering an array of physical ailments, he took his own life shortly before his 62nd birthday, only a few years after earning both a Pulitzer for The Old Man and the Sea and a Nobel. Okay, so from this introduction to Hemingway, I think what I want to, draw attention to, just for the sake of like noting a couple of things here, I like to highlight in yellow when I annotate, and then I like to um, draw and write things in blue. I don't know why, it's just a combination of yellow and blue just works well for me. Um, but he volunteered as a Red Cross ambulance driver, and he joined the famed expatriate circle in Paris. He was listed as a masterful literary craftsman and spokesman for the lost generation. So just make a note to myself over here, spokesman for the lost generation. You don't actually have to annotate the author introductions. It's not a requirement for the reading engagements, but it can be helpful. And if you want to make any kind of observations, it can be beneficial. So, what draws me to this? The famed expatriate circle, Paris. He's an American living in Europe. You'll see in just a moment that the story Hills Like White Elephants, one of the characters is an American living in Europe. So it's kind of similar to Hemingway, his background. It's important that we not assume that the character is Hemingway, but we have to imagine the character might be somebody kind of like Hemingway, maybe a veteran, maybe someone who volunteered to assist the military, maybe just a writer living abroad. In the 1910s and 20s, a lot of Americans moved to Europe to be part of where like the literary circles were at the time. So that is relevant. Okay, keep an eye out for footnotes. Footnotes, the definition or the elaboration are always down at the bottom of the page. Um, and those are included for your benefit, right? So when you see the little symbol, make sure you're paying attention to that. Notice too that there are little numbers in the margin. These are for paragraphs. You don't actually cite by paragraphs, but there are also page numbers in the upper corner. So when you talk about the text on the discussion forum, or when you talk about the text in one of your reflection papers or in your analytical essay, you've got page numbers in the corner. And there are also page numbers in the book, and there are page numbers in the ebook as well that you can pull from and cite from. Okay. The hills across the valley of the Ebro were long and white. So that's the very first sentence, and you might not think, that there's really anything to notice here, but think about the title of the story. The title of the story is Hills Like White Elephants. And the first sentence of the story includes the word hills and the word white. So there's something going on here in the arrangement of the story. The attention is being drawn to the hills and the white. So I'm just gonna like make an observation here with a comment, mentions hills and white in the first sentence. On this side, there was no shade and no trees, and the station was between two lines of rails in the sun. Close against the side of the station, there was the warm shadow of the building and a curtain made of strings of bamboo beads hung across the open door into the bar to keep out flies. The American and the girl with him sat at a table in the shade outside the building. It was very hot, and the express from Barcelona would come in 40 minutes. It stopped at this junction for 2 minutes and went on to Madrid. Okay, so just looking at the first paragraph here, sometimes when I'm doing annotations on a text, I'm reading the text and then I'm kind of like maybe backspacing and putting in some annotations. Sometimes I'm going to put in annotations as I'm reading. There's no right way to do it, but just looking at this first paragraph, a few things are sort of coming to mind. Again, I have the benefit of having read the story before, so I'm not completely fresh or new to the story. But a couple of images or ideas are kind of popping out to me. The first thing is that the characters are just called the American and the girl. Sorry, this is one of those situations where I can't get the highlighting to work perfectly. Oh, come on. I start on the other end of girl here. Okay, this is fine. So, unnamed characters, but interestingly, but one is called the American and the other is called the girl. Now, by the end of the story, it'll be clear that the girl, I mean, she's an adult, she's not a child. Um, but maybe the implication here is that she's younger, maybe she's 18, 19, 20. The story doesn't actually state how old she is, but think about the difference between, the American and the girl versus the American and the woman. There is a sort of sense of youth that is being implied by calling her the girl, but they're unnamed characters. That's kind of interesting. They don't have names at this point in the story, and they actually don't have names by the end of the story either. So that kind of draws attention to me. This is listed as a junction. There are two lines of rails in the sun. So this is where two railroad lines are crossing, and it's called a junction. And so there is the kind of sense here of like at the crossroads that implies some, there two intersecting components are happening here. Hemingway was really famous as a writer, and one of the reasons I wanted to pick this story for a sample annotation is that very famously, no one knows exactly what's going on here. It's kind of on purpose. He's writing very much at the surface level. He's referring to things obliquely, and lots of people over the years have really questioned what exactly is going on here, how exactly the characters feel, how exactly the characters have reached a conclusion. Have they? Are they going to stay together? It's an open debate. There's no like clear-cut critical consensus on this story. So you got to keep that in mind as you're going through and reading texts. Some texts simply have um, you know, open-endedness, and it's okay. And some texts, this is a famous story for what's not being said, and requires the reader to read very carefully. I remember when I was in college, the very first time I read this story, it like went right over my head. I had no idea what I was reading. I was fascinated, I was fascinated as, so much about the story, but I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to reflect on it. And then when the professor kind of explained what was going on in the story, it blew my mind. Hemingway, as a writer, very famously had something called the iceberg method of writing. So if you know anything about icebergs, um, they are actually structured like this. So if you think about the way an ice cube floats in a glass of water, most of the ice cube is submerged when an ice cube is floating in a glass of water, and there might just be a little bit sticking out on top. If you know anything about like the Titanic hitting an iceberg, it's not just the part that's above the water that's affected, but it's the part that's below the water that's affected. It's not just a piece of ice floating on the surface, but there's a lot of mass and ice below the surface. Hemingway had a writing style that people famously called the iceberg storytelling approach, right? Which is he would give you just a little bit that you could see, but there was so much under the surface of the text, right? And so you often have to read between the lines when you're reading a Hemingway story, which makes it a good story for our purposes here. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete my little iceberg. You know what? I wish I hadn't done that. I could have left it on here. That would have been fine. Sometimes I've had students in the past when they're annotating, draw little things on their reading. That's okay. You go ahead and do that. What should we drink? The girl asked. She had taken off her hat and put it on the table. It's pretty hot, the man said. Okay, this is the second time the word hot has been mentioned. It was very hot, said the first paragraph. It's pretty hot, the man said. So we get the atmosphere of heat, right? Um, things are heated, they're uncomfortable. Think about the way in which the setting, feeling heated and uncomfortable, might be coming into effect here. Let's drink beer. Dos cervezas, the man said into the curtain. Big ones? A woman asked from the doorway. Yes, two big ones. The woman brought two glasses of beer and two felt pads. She put the pads and the beer glasses on the table and looked at the man and the girl. The girl was looking off at the line of hills. They were white in the sun, and the country was brown and dry. Okay, so the girl is looking off to the hills. We have an association between the girl and the White Hills. Okay. They look like white elephants, she said. Okay, well, here we are, right? Now we have the title of the story that has really fully come into view. They look like white elephants, she said. I've never seen one. The man drank his beer. No, you wouldn't have. I might have, the man said. Just because you say I wouldn't doesn't prove anything. So when they begin to have this conversation about the white elephants, you can feel there's tension happening here, right? So I'm going to take my little eyedropper tool. I'm just going to drop it down here. No, you wouldn't have, right? There's tension between the two of them. Now, if you didn't see that immediately, that's okay. I'm aware that there's a little bit of tension here, but as I think about this, there's some tension that's going on, and we have in the text they look like white elephants. Not that they are white elephants, mind you, but they look like white elephants. So we have this association. Um, the girl observes the mountains look like white elephants. Now, this might be an opportunity. Maybe you have a question, right? Maybe you say to yourself, "Wait, what? Why a white elephant? What is exactly is going on here with a white elephant?" So, I don't recommend that you read with your phone open or the internet going live in the background or anything like that. But if you were to go and say to yourself, "Oh, that's kind of interesting," I'm going to go and I'm just going to look up white elephant. What is a white elephant? You will see that, really clearly up here on well, I'm just going to click on the Wikipedia page for a white elephant now. A white elephant is a possession that its owner cannot dispose of without extreme difficulty, and whose cost, particularly that of maintenance, is out of proportion to its usefulness. So I'm gonna in my annotations here, I'm gonna define a white elephant. Um, a white elephant is a possession that its owner cannot dispose of without extreme difficulty, and whose cost, particularly that of maintenance, is out of proportion to its usefulness. Okay. So the if you look further down on the Wikipedia page, um, it talks about how white elephants, the phrase sort of enters into the English lexicon. The idea is that like a white elephant is a really unique thing, and so if you got it as a gift, it'd be like, oh wow, this is really special. No one else has a white elephant. But very, quickly you would realize, gosh, having an elephant as a gift is a real pain in the butt. Where are you going to keep it? How are you going to keep it fed? How are you going to, pay people to take care of it? That's a big deal that you have, trying to take care of it. So she makes the observations that the mountains look like white elephants, the hills out in the back look like white elephants. And we now know that a white elephant is a possession that its owner cannot dispose of without great difficulty. Okay, now keep that in mind as we keep reading. The girl looked at the bead curtain. They've painted something on it, she said. What does it say? Anise del Toro. It's a drink. Could we try it? The man called, listen, through the curtain. The woman came out from the bar. 4 reales. We want 2 anise del Toro. With water? Do you want it with water? I don't know, the girl said. Is it good with water? It's all right. You want them with water? Asked the woman. Yes, with water. It tastes like licorice, the girl said and put the glass down. That's the way with everything. Yes, the girl said. Everything tastes like licorice, especially all the things you've waited so long for, like absinthe. Oh, cut it out. You started it, the girl said. I was being amused. I was having a fine time. Well, let's try and have a fine time. All right, I was trying. I said the mountains look like white elephants. Wasn't that bright? Okay, so we have this really interesting passage of dialogue that's happening here. And if you're reading along with me as I'm reading the text as is, you notice how the dialogue is starting to overlap. Um, and each character has a turn talking, but Hemingway is deliberately not always using descriptor dialogue tags to say who's talking and who's not talking. You have to pay really close attention to what's going on here. So, I might draw a box here, you know, um, kind of make an observation, not always clear who's talking or uh, who has the line of dialogue that's being spoken. I mean, it's clear who's talking, right? The American, the woman, or the girl, but it's like, do you want it with water? Is I guess that's the man, right? We want 2 anise del Toro, that's the man talking, with water. That's probably the woman behind the bar. Do you want it with water is probably the man saying it to the girl. I don't know, the girl said, is it good with water? It's all right. I'm assuming the man, he has the experience of knowing what anise del Toro is. She doesn't know what it is. Uh, you want them with water? Ask the woman. Yes, with water. And then there's this like jump, right? The girl tastes the drink, and she said it tastes like licorice. I wanted to try this new drink. That's all we do, isn't it? Look at things and try new drinks? I guess so. The girl looked across at the hills. They're lovely hills, she said. They don't really look like white elephants. I just meant the coloring of their skin through the trees. Should we have another drink? All right. The warm wind blew the bead curtain against the table. The beer is nice and cool, the man said. It's lovely, the girl said. It's really an awfully simple operation, Jig, the man said. It's not really an operation at all. Okay, now all of us we have a huge shift in what's going on in this story, right? So we we have let's take a step back and see kind of what's going on here. So the girl says, I wanted to try this new drink. That's all we do, isn't it? Look at things and try new drinks. So it's kind of hard to deduce exactly what she's feeling here, right? What's her perspective, her point of view? It's not entirely clear. Is she frustrated? Is she complaining? Is she being passive aggressive, right? When she says that's all we do, isn't it? Look at things and try new drinks. Is she saying that like in their relationship, they've kind of hit this this stagnant point that's kind of a lull. They're not really growing, they're not really developing things. Does she resent that? Is she resentful? Does she want something new? Does she want something else? His response is just like, I guess so. And so he kind of feels in, it seems to me, is he indifferent? Right? Is he indifferent? Does he not know what to say? I don't know the answers to these questions, by the way, but just as I'm reading, these are some of the thoughts that are coming into my mind. Now, I don't have all of these thoughts formulated in my head, but as I slow down and notice something, right? Like I notice when she said, "That's all we do, isn't it?" I kind of heard it in my head like she's kind of, you know, throwing it back in his face or throwing something back in his face. Um, and he's kind of dismissive, it almost seems like. Is he dismissive? The more I sit and think about it, the more I come up with annotations to put into the text. But then she takes a switch, right? They're lovely hills. They don't really look like white elephants. I just meant the coloring. So previously she said they looked like white elephants. Then she said they don't look like white elephants, right? So, as a question here, is she backtracking? Why is she changing her mind or her view of what's going on? It's not entirely clear. But he clearly doesn't really want to engage with her, right? He says, "Should we have another drink?" And she says, "Fine." He wants to talk about, he says, the beer is cold. She says it's fine. And then he says, "It's really an awfully simple operation, Jig," the man said. "It's not really an operation at all." Okay, so this raises a big question in my mind. It's not at all clear what he's talking about. What is the operation he's talking about? Is Jig a nickname for the girl? Right? It's kind of a little uncertain. But in response to him saying that, it says the girl looked at the ground the table legs rested on. "I know you wouldn't mind it, Jig. It's not really anything. It's just to let the air in." The girl did not say anything. "I'll go with you and I'll stay with you all the time. They just let the air in and then it's all perfectly natural." So he's trying to convince her of something. He's trying to convince her to get an operation that lets air in, right? "I'll go with you. I'll stay there with you all the time," right? I'll go. So again, that my observation here is he's trying to convince her to get the operation. Then what will we do afterward? We'll be fine afterward, just like we were before. What makes you think so? That's the only thing that bothers us. It's the only thing that makes us unhappy. The girl looked at the bead curtain, put her hand out, and took hold of two of the strings of beads. "And you think then we'll be all right and be happy?" "I know we will. You don't have to be afraid. I've known lots of people that have done it." "So have I," said the girl. "And afterward they were all so happy." "Well," the man said, "if you don't want to, you don't have to. I wouldn't have you do it if you didn't want to. But I know it's perfectly simple." "And you really want to?" "I think it's the best thing to do. I don't want you to do it if you don't really want to. And if I do it, you'll be happy and things will be like they were and you'll love me." "I love you now. You know I love you." "I know. But if I do it, then it will be nice again if I say things are like white elephants and you'll like it." I'll love it. I love it now, but I just can't think about it. You know how I get when I worry. If I do it, you won't ever worry. Well, I won't worry about that because it's perfectly simple. Then I'll do it because I don't care about me. Okay. So we've read this back and forth, and you'll no doubt notice as I'm reading the lines, I'm getting kind of wrapped up in the dialogue. Maybe it's time to slow down and just remind myself of what's going on here, right? The emphasis is that trying to once she gets the procedure, he says we'll be fine afterward, just like we were before. She says, how does he know that? And he says, that's the only thing that bothers us. It's the only thing that's made us unhappy. All right, so that's the only thing that bothers us. He's speaking for both of them, right? He's using the plural, right? It bothers us. She's not really she's not really indicating that she's bothered, but he's clearly bothered by it. And in the passage that I just, took a look at, again, I'm gonna switch over to the draw sign here. There's something about this word us, and then here it is again, right? That is drawing my attention. I'm kind of like hooked in on that. Um, I've never noticed that, by the way, the us. I just noticed it for the very first time here. So that's one of the cool things about rereading a text. There's an emphasis on this happy, right? I've known lots of people that have done it. So if I said the girl and afterward they were also happy, the man says, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to, right? I wouldn't have you do it if you didn't want to, but I know it's perfectly simple. So he's telling her she doesn't have to do it, right? He's telling her she doesn't have to do it, but it seems really clear that he wants it done, right? At the very least. I think it's the best thing to do, but I don't want you to do it, right? And you'll be happy if I do it, and things will be like they were, and you'll love me. He says, "I love you now. You know I do." She says, "It'll be nice again if I say things are like white elephants, and you'll like it." So she's kind of drawing attention to. She's drawing attention to the fact that before, if she made that joke or that observation, he'd have engaged, but this time he's not. So it's clear that she's trying to stir up this conversation about what the hills look like, and he's got something else on his mind. And he says that, right? Um, he's got something else on his mind. And it's clear now, not only have we come in on the middle of them, they're at this train station and they're about to get on this train, but there's a lot that predated what's happening here. That they've been maybe having conversations about this thing, and we're now sort of, it's like here's an observation that I've just made for the first time. I hadn't really thought about it this way. Um, but I'm gonna use the pointer here to drop this idea here. It's like we're eavesdropping or overhearing their conversation at the train station, right? Like we're not part of their stories, but it's like we're sitting at the table next to them and they've been having a conversation that like far predates us, and now we're sitting here and we're kind of like, what are they talking about? Like we're kind of, eavesdropping, spying on them a little bit. She says, I'll do it because I don't care about me. He says, what do you mean? She says, I don't care about me. He says, well, I care about you. She says, oh, yes, but I don't care about me. And I'll do it, and then everything will be fine. I don't want you to do it if you feel that way. The girl stood up and walked to the end of the station. Across, on the other side, were fields of grain and trees along the banks of the Ebro. Far away, beyond the river, were mountains. The shadow of a cloud moved across the field of grain, and she saw the river through the trees. So this, this might be going a little deep into the story. You don't need to go this deep when you do kind of annotations, but there's not been a lot of description until now, right? I mean, there was at the start, but at the start, the description was, the land was kind of barren and brown and dry and dead. And then there's this other side on the other side of the river where there's grain and trees, right? So we've got this kind of like dead on one side, life on the other side, kind of cool dynamic that's going on here. So fields of grain and trees along the bank of the Ebro. Um, like plant life on one side, on the other side is like dirt, and sort of a barren, you know, dusty, deserty type land. And we could have all this, she said. We could have everything, and every day we make it more impossible. What did you say? I said we could have everything. We can have everything. No, we can't. We can have the whole world. No, we can't. We can go anywhere. No, we can't. It isn't ours anymore. It's ours. No, it isn't. And once they take it away, you never get it back. But they haven't taken it away. We'll wait and see. So this is another moment in the text, right, where there's like the lines of dialogue are kind of flying at each other, and we know that we're alternating between character perspectives, but we have to slow down and remind ourselves who's saying what. And so when she, the girl, chimes in, no, it isn't, and once they take it away, you never get it back. My feeling at this moment is that this feels important, right? Feels important. What's she talking about? Is she, sorry, is she talking about the same thing he is? Right? Come on back in the shade, he said. You mustn't feel that way. I don't feel any way, the girl said. I just know things. I don't want you to do anything that you don't want to. Not that, I'm sorry, nor that isn't good for me, she said. I know. Could we have another beer? Okay, so now the vibe here kind of following, right? All right, but you've got to realize, I realize, the girl said. Can't we maybe stop talking? So she's frustrated, mad. They aren't seeing eye to eye, right? And she's interrupting him now. They sat down at the table, and the girl looked across at the hills on the dry side of the valley, and the man looked at her and at the table. You've got to realize, he said, that I don't want you to do it if you don't want to. I'm perfectly willing to go through with it if it means anything to you. Doesn't it mean anything to you? We could get along. Of course it does, but I don't want anybody but you. I don't want anyone else. And I know it's perfectly simple. Yes, you know it's perfectly simple. So he's the one who says, I don't want anybody but you. I don't want anyone else. So, in the context of talking about this operation, he's saying he only wants her. He doesn't want anyone else, right? He emphasizes he wants her and no one else. And he says it's perfectly simple, right? That goes back to the reference to his comment about the operation. And she says, yes, you know, it's perfectly simple, right? There's a bit of irony here, maybe, right? The literary term would be irony. Um, she's being sarcastic, right? She doesn't really mean what she's saying. Um, she's almost like mocking him, right? Like he keeps signifying, how simple it is, and she keeps, coming back. She's like, you just keep coming back to that, right? Perhaps the implication is it's simple for him, but not that it's simple for her, right? I might want to write that in. Is it simple for him, but not for her? It's all right for you to say that, but I do know it. Would you do something for me now? I'd do anything for you. Would you please, 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 please stop talking? Okay. So I want to draw attention because I mean, there's been some repetition in this story in the same way that there's any kind of repetition in an argument, right? These characters are not seeing eye to eye. There's tension and conflict between them. He keeps saying over and over and over, it's simple, just do it. We can go back. And she's finally kind of reached her breaking point. So at this point, right, she's really frustrated with him. And Hemingway shows that by having her repeat the word please, multiple, multiple times. He did not say anything but looked at the bags against the wall of the station. There were labels on them from all the hotels where they had spent nights. Okay, right? All the hotels where they had spent nights. Um, there's something not being said here, right? I think the implication is they're spending nights in hotels. What do people do when they're in hotels, right? There's usually a level of intimacy. So there's intimacy, sex being referenced in this moment. He's, they're having this fight. He's looking at the luggage that's got all of these tags on them and stickers on them from all the hotels where they've been. But I don't want you to, he said. I don't care anything about it. I'll scream, the girl said. Like she's like at her breaking point, maximum level of frustration with this guy. The woman came out through the curtains with two glasses of beer and put them down on the damp felt pads. The train comes in 5 minutes, she said. What did she say? Asked the girl. That the train is coming in 5 minutes. Okay, so we see that it's coming in 5 minutes, right? But the man has been speaking Spanish to the woman. I think the implication is the woman speaks Spanish and the girl doesn't speak Spanish, but the man does speak Spanish. So he's bilingual. And so he's an American, but he also speaks Spanish, right? So even though the woman says the train comes in 5 minutes, maybe we should hear in this the woman is speaking Spanish because the girl doesn't know and asks him for sort of a translation. She doesn't use the word translation, but there's that. I think that's implied in this moment. The girl smiled brightly at the woman to thank her. So there's nonverbal communication happening here, but also it's like to thank her. What's kind of going on here, right? Like, is the girl like is the woman picking up that the girl is frustrated? The girl is frustrated. Is the girl thanking, sorry, my fingers are kind of all over. Is the girl thanking the woman for interrupting the fight and like helping to change the subject? I'd better take the bags over to the other side of the station, the man said. She smiled at him. All right, then come back and we'll finish the beer. He picked up the two heavy bags and carried them around the station to the other tracks. He looked up the tracks but could not see the train. Coming back, he walked through the bar room where people waiting for the train were drinking. He drank an anise at the bar and looked at the people. They were all waiting reasonably for the train. That's such a strange word. Re They were waiting reasonably? How does somebody wait reasonably? Except kind of raises the question, does he think the girl is being unreasonable, right? Is the question here, does he think the girl is being unreasonable? Right? Is that kind of like the implication that's being built in here? He went through the bead curtain. She was sitting at the table and smiled at him. "Do you feel better?" he asked. "I feel fine," she said. "There's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine." And that's the end of the story, right? We get to the in the anthology, you get down, you see the date when the text was published, 1927. Um, this would be a great opportunity to write on a text something like, "Huh? What does the end of the story mean?" But also, like at the same time, like it, over the years, I've seen students as they're going through the process of annotating and they like leave a comment at the end of the story, like, "I'm confused, what's going on here?" That's a good feeling to lean into. It's a good feeling to acknowledge. But I would encourage you take that one extra step, if possible, and like try to offer up a thought. Now, I mentioned already that this is a story that for years has been a subject of critical debate. What are they talking about? What does she feel? Go back to the idea of the iceberg, right? We are sitting at a table, we're looking over, we're seeing something happen, but there's a lot going on under the surface that we as readers, we as sort of metaphoric observers in this story don't have access to. We don't have access to their past, except through little hints of things. We don't have access to their internal feelings, right? Except little glimpses of things like they were all waiting reasonably for the train, he seems to see. Um, we see her mounting level of frustration. So instead of just saying, "What does the story mean?" That's a great thing to annotate on here, by the way. But you might like take a moment and try to say, like, do I have an idea of what the ending here is? I don't think she's fine. Um, or if she is, she's fine in another direction. Um, let's kind of expressly identify what's going on here. Um, she's pregnant. He wants her to get an abortion, right? That's the operation that he keeps talking about. They let a little bit of air in, and the rest is natural. The idea is that they're sort of inducing a miscarriage at this point. And he doesn't want anybody else. The implication being he doesn't want a child. All he wants is her. But she seems to be much more conflicted about this than he is, right? Now, put that in relief to the idea of the white elephant, right? And the definition of a white elephant, a possession that its owner cannot dispose of without extreme difficulty and whose cost, particularly that of its maintenance, is out of proportion to its usefulness. Think too about the image of the hills like white elephants, right? A hill is a curved shape, curved like the back of an elephant, curved like a pregnant stomach is curved. The white elephant here is in reference to the fetus that she is pregnant with. Who knows how long how far along she is. It's not clear, but it is become clearer now at the end of the story that they are having this conversation about her getting an abortion. He wants her to do it. He keeps sort of manipulating her through this reverse psychology kind of thing where he keeps saying, "I love you. I don't want you to do it if you don't want to do it." It's like he's trying to say, "Don't blame me. I'm not making you do this." But like at the same time, he's really pushing her to do it. There's an astute observation of human dynamics here. Um, Especially when two people in a relationship aren't seeing eye to eye on something, especially something really serious. Now, when we get to the end of the story, she tells him, "Look, this is over. I don't want to talk about this anymore." But what does that mean? Does that mean she's made up her mind that she's going to go through with it, and so she doesn't want to keep talking about it anymore? Does that mean she's decided she wants to keep the baby? And in which case, either they're going to split up and she's going to go her own way and have the baby, and he's going to go his own way and do his own thing, or um, is it possible she still doesn't know what she wants to do, right? Um, it's not entirely clear what she has decided. What we get from her at the end of the story is, "I feel fine," she said. "There's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine." And the possible meanings here, right? There's nothing wrong with me. Is she saying psychologically there's nothing wrong with her? Is she saying the fact that she's pregnant means there's nothing wrong with her, that he thinks the pregnancy is wrong? She doesn't feel that way, right? The story sort of ends ambiguously. But I mean, either way, I don't think she's fine. I don't think she's like fully happy or relieved, right? He says, "Do you feel better?" She does not say yes or no. She says, "I feel fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I feel fine." Has she decided to do it because she loves him, but she resents the fact that he's making her do it? It's unclear. But I think what's going on here, right? I don't think she's fine, but I think in the ambiguity of the ending, um, in the ambiguity of the ending, we're being asked to consider the sort of the complexity of human emotion, right? And how we'd feel in that moment, right? Not necessarily like how we would feel if we were the man in that situation, but how we would feel if we were the woman in that situation, whether we as readers are men or women or non-binary or however, we're thinking about it or approaching it, right? So, we've reached the end now of these annotations. We've got a lot going on here. There's a lot of comments and feedback. I tried to walk you through the story and think about how I would respond to things. I probably drew a lot more onto the text than you might draw, for the sake of sort of illustrating how I would go through and think about annotating this particular story. But the point is, right, like now that we're at the end of the story and we're kind of like looking through the comments and the highlights and the boxes and the text that I've written on, this is the text that feels lived in, thought about, reflected on, right? I've gone through and annotated it in real time. I hope uh, as you were reading this, you were able to appreciate the approach and the development of the thoughts and the comments that I've put, and how you too can engage with a text like this. One thing that I want to make really clear here at the end of this walkthrough is, again, there's no expectation that reading a text one time will reveal everything about the text to you. Anybody who's ever taken a literature class, including your professor, knows the feeling of being an undergraduate student, reading something, not fully understanding it, coming to class, talking about it, and then understanding it a little more. There's nothing wrong with you if you sit down to read it and you feel like you don't 100% get it. That's kind of what the class is designed to do, to help you um, go back and familiarize yourself. The goal is always, as you read, you get stronger as a reader. Another thing that I really want to emphasize is that you don't have to read out loud, of course, but try to read slowly if you can. I know not all, we don't all have time to read everything, but I've tried to structure the class around a reasonable reading load each week so that you can read things, sort of think about them, meditate on them, reflect on them, engage with them. Don't hesitate to, circle back and leave some annotations. Don't hesitate to, write, real reactions or make explicit on the page the thoughts that you're thinking as you're trying to work through what's going on in the text. All of these things are perfectly acceptable ways to annotate, and you probably are going to come up with other ways to annotate that are going to be slightly different than mine, or more substantial than mine, or more developed than mine. And I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts on these texts as I go through and assess your reading engagements, and then as we talk about them on the discussion board together throughout the class. Just a reminder, I talked about this in the course overview video, and you can see this in the discussion forum. Our discussions are on a lag. So you have, like all of week 2 to read the stories. Or actually, let's use this week as an example, right? You have this week to read James Joyce's Araby and James Baldwin's story, Sonny's Blues, but we don't talk about those texts until week 2. So you don't have to read quickly and post things on the discussion board and reply to things on the discussion board. The discussions occur in arrears. So we do the reading and then the following week we discuss the text. That way it gives you time to read, to think about, to engage, and then you don't feel rushed to complete certain, discussion contributions or something like that. I look forward to talking in the course about all of these concepts. I appreciate you hanging out with me as I read Hills Like White Elephants. I hope you appreciated the story. I appreciate the artistry of what Hemingway is up to, and I hope you feel a little more confident when it comes to reading literature for this class and engaging in the reading engagement assignments. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I will see you in the course.